2, 1. Good afternoon. This is Mayor Cyril Jefferson convening a special meeting for the High Point City Council. I am present, and along with me, I have Councilmember Tim Andrew, Councilmember Amanda Cook, Councilmember Patrick Harmon, Councilmember Vicky McKeever, and Councilmember Monica Peters. Our agenda today includes a number of discussions where we have presentations. Prior to going into our agenda, though, we'll call for a motion and entertain a motion, that is, to adopt our agenda. Is there one? Motion made by Councilmember Harmon, seconded by Councilmember Cook. Any discussion on the motion to adopt our agenda? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those against, the ayes have it, and we have our agenda. With that, we'll move to item 2024-175. For that, I'll ask Mr. Stephen Harrelip to join us, where he will present the proposed City of High Point fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. Mr. Harrelip, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon to you and members of the City Council. I'm here to present the FY 24-25 proposed budget. Just a little kind of housekeeping. This is the longer version of the presentation, kind of in between very high level and in the weeds. There will be a similar presentation this evening. It's a shorter presentation, if not the exact same slides, very similar. And then this evening we'll ask for action to adopt the budget calendar as well as set the public hearing date. Presenting the proposed FY 24-25 budget. The budget is balanced in accordance with North Carolina general statutes. It has been filed with the city clerk. It is available on the city's website. A copy of the budget document that you all have, the hard copies in front of you, will be dropped off at the High Point Public Library tomorrow morning. Kind of our budget overview. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the total budget, including revenues and expenditures. We're talking about the general fund, some of our major enterprise funds, specifically water, sewer, electric, solid waste, and stormwater. We're going to talk briefly about our capital improvement program, or CIP, and talk about next steps and kind of explain what those next steps entail and what the calendar looks like. Before we dive into the details of the total budget, I just want to talk about a little bit about some of the challenges and realities that we face when putting together this budget. A lot of the same things we saw last year, inflation and the cost of doing business, has been an issue. It continues to be an issue. Rising costs in salaries and benefits, recruitment and retention, not just in our public safety areas, but also spreading to our other departments. And on the revenue side, we are seeing growth. The economy is growing. However, the economy is not growing, and our revenues are not growing at the kind of pace that it has been in previous years. Our expenditures are outpacing our growth in revenues. There's also some nuances with our sales tax revenue that we're going to get into that is causing some pressures on the proposed budget. This pie chart shows the total budget by fund. The total budget equals $518.7 million. I'll note that within electric, they're in that kind of upper right pie chart, $147.3 million, $83 million of that is our wholesale power costs. And then the general fund budget, that is the second largest fund. Electric and general fund combined are about 56, almost 56% of the total budget. Details on what these funds are and what's are in these funds is all in your proposed budget documents. So this table shows the proposed budget kind of by revenue category compared to the current year's adopted budget. And we're going to go into more detail on what's driving some of these changes in the subsequent slides. I will note, kind of not quite in the middle, the charges for service. That's where a lot of our enterprise fund rates are. That's where our water sewer charges are, our electric charges, solid waste, stormwater, and the like. The total budget is increased just over $40 million, or 8.4%. Before we look at just the specific details, a little bit of highlights of revenues. The proposed budget increases the property tax rate by 3 cents to 64.75 cents per $100 valuation. There is no increase to solid waste fees or stormwater fees, and the budget includes a proposed 5% increase in water sewer rates. On electric rates, there is no increase to electric rates, but there are some changes to electric rates. A couple of them, the base facilities charge is revenue neutral, as well as a consolidation of the time of use, coincident peak, and commercial non-demand fee schedules, and those are on the commercial industrial side. There's also a renewable energy portfolio standard, or REPS charge, and that's a charge that is required by statutes and is passed on to the power agency. And then there's a new fee for electric vehicle charging. And when we talk about electric later in the presentation, I'll get a little bit more detail on that. Some other changes in fees, parks and recreation. There's some proposed increases to golf course fees, recreation center rentals, and also staff usage. What I mean by staff usage is, let's say I was gonna rent out City Lake Pool for an event, and that would require a lifeguard. The current fee schedule, the cost of the lifeguard doesn't match what we're paying hourly per lifeguard, so we're adjusting that to match what we're paying. There's also increases in theater auditorium rates, and then some other kind of small fee increases across various departments, hydrant meter deposits, non-lease parking spaces during the market, and a reduction in transit of the minimum deposit that you can put on a transit user card. Looking at property tax, overall, those are increased about $5.52 million. A penny on the tax rate generates $1,362,466. And this is off a valuation of $13,739,614,484. And that valuation increase is 1.77% above last year's valuation. A little bit more about our tax base. We are in 4 counties. Almost 94% of our tax base is Guilford County. Forsyth County is about 1% of our tax base. Davidson County, not quite 5% of our tax base. And Randolph County, about 0.5% of our tax base. I note that because a large increase in Forsyth's tax base, while we will gladly accept and is great to see, is not going to have the same revenue impact as a much lower increase for, say, Guilford County. It's really what Guilford does drives a lot of our revenues on the property tax side. The chart to the right shows how we divide the property tax rate within funds. 3.4 cents is still allocated for debt service, with the remaining and the increase that's proposed going to the general fund. Moving on to sales and use tax. Those are decreased budget to budget by $536,000, and $996,000, or almost $1 million of that, is in our retail sales tax. A little bit more on sales tax. Our current year estimates have us ending the year about 1.3% above last year, which is about $382,000. For comparison's sake, in FY20, and that was the year that the last 3 months had the COVID shutdown, sales tax grew 1.8%. FY21, 13%. FY22, almost 15%. Last year, FY23, about 9%. And so we're still seeing growth in sales tax, but it has slowed down. Our projections for next year are 2.75% above the current year's projected year end. And there's also an ad valorem distribution change. We're going to talk a little bit more of that in the next slide, but that last bullet, the ad valorem distribution change, is very key to that decrease in sales tax. Our utility sales tax, which is also included in this category, and that's on electric and natural gas, is increasing $375,000.
Stephen, I'm sorry, just really quickly, just want to note, City Manager mentioned to me, I know when we got the overview from finance, maybe a couple months ago, you all talked about, and maybe it wasn't you all, I think it was our folks who come in. Davenport, that's who it is. They came in and talked about how what we get in sales tax is affected by what we charge in our tax rate, if I'm not mistaken. And so an adjustment to our property tax rate also increases what we get in sales tax back from the county. Is that correct? Correct. Okay, so I just want to make that note.
Perfect transition into this slide, and in addition to that,
I had no idea that was coming.
And in addition, what others do with their tax rates can affect our sales tax. With us, there's nothing we can do about it. Again, not getting too much in the weeds, but I feel this is important because it's a large impact on our revenues. Sales tax is distributed at High Point in 2 ways. The first is per capita, which is a percentage of the population. That's how Davidson County and Randolph County distribute their sales tax. The more people you have, the more you're going to get. The other is the ad valorem distribution, which is used by Forsyth and Guilford. And so this is a percentage of your property tax revenues. Your property tax revenues can change if your valuation changes or if your tax rate changes, either up or down. Guilford County, which is 91% of our sales tax, our ad valorem distribution in the current year is a little over 9%. Our projection for next year have that dropping to about 8.72%. It's that many decimals because that's how the Department of Revenue shows it. This is a result of Greensboro raised taxes last year. And so there's a 1-year delay before there's a change in your distribution percentage. It doesn't look like a lot, just 0.3%, but that's on about $258+ million that are going to Guilford County. That impact to High Point in next year's budget is about $815,000. Now that's based on our projections, and if we get more sales tax, it could affect us a little bit more. But that's where things currently stand. There's nothing we could do about it other than we knew it was coming. But until you really see the impact, I mean, you can prepare for it, but until you see really what that number is, that's kind of what it does.
David, is that like a county decision about how they do the sales?
The distribution percentage, yes, it's solely made by the counties. I would speculate that the vast majority of counties pick the method that gets them the most money. If Guilford decided to switch to per capita, that would be very well for our sales tax, but that would be millions of dollars in less sales tax for Guilford County. And so that decision is usually made every April and then goes into effect kind of later in the year, but you don't see a lot of changes in that. Our projections on those percentages, we have Greensboro's distribution percentage going up about 1.4%, and Guilford going down a little bit over 1%. None of the other jurisdictions in Guilford County have an ad valorem distribution percentage higher than 1%, and so if they go up in their rates or went down in the rates, it affects us, but in a very small amount. It's really what Guilford does or what Greensboro does or what we do.
And Mayor, members of council, as a point of reference, when we look at the tax rate in 2022, the city of High Point had our tax rate at 64.75, and Greensboro was at 66.25. In 2023, both jurisdictions lowered their tax rate. High Point went to 61.75, and Greensboro went to 63.25. But then the following year, Greensboro had a tax increase that took their tax rate to 67 cents, and ours stayed at 61. So that's what you're seeing reflected here was that year that Greensboro increased their tax rate, which was last year, and we did not.
And another point of note here is that the year that we cut and Greensboro cut was the year of the county valuation.
It was.
And part of our reasoning, I can't speak for Greensboro, but part of our reasoning was that we had the county valuation, which increased what our tax base was, which meant that our revenues were gonna jump way up. And our reasoning was to cut back down to almost be revenue neutral, not entirely revenue neutral, but we slashed the rate. I think at that point, was it 3 cents or 4 cents?
We did. It was 3 cents at that
3
point.
cents. So we slashed at 3 cents to remain revenue neutral. Greensboro did as well, but unless I'm mistaken, that's not what the majority of other municipalities in our region did. Most of them either stayed pat. I don't know if they cut at all. And so they were able to benefit from keeping their tax rates where they were.
It really just depends on what each municipality has going on at the time. At the time that we cut our rate, again, Greensboro did cut their rate that year as well. But the following year, when they increased the tax revenue rate, we did not. And it resulted in this impact in terms of our sales tax distribution.
So we'll be paying a close eye to what Guilford and Greensboro do with their budgets. Obviously, there's nothing we can do about the impact to next year, but we do want to monitor what could happen in subsequent years and prepare as best we can. Looking at some of the other revenue categories and kind of the year-to-year change, intergovernmental revenue is reduced $4.46 million. However, last year there was a couple major capital grants, $5 million for stormwater on West Green Drive, and then a couple for NCDOT in our general capital. Those are kind of one-time grants that we budgeted. Those projects are budgeted for, we're not budgeting them again, and so you see the capital grants going down $7 million. So we're not losing any major intergovernmental, that's just kind of an ebb and flow of some of your intergovernmental revenues from grants. We are budgeting the 300 Oak federal grant. This was awarded several years ago. We just haven't taken the steps to formally budget it, and so we're using the proposed budget as a mechanism to do that. Some of the other ones, the homeless day shelter and the shared use kitchen, we brought those via amendment, but we just felt the time was right to include it with this proposed budget. Charges for service increase about $6.84 million. The majority of this is in water sewer, which is reflecting that proposed 5% rate increase. But there's also an increase in our health insurance fund. Health insurance fund charges departments, which they then contribute to help pay for the fund, and so that's increased a little over $1.28 million. And then lastly, fund balance, and that was the top of that chart, and it kind of stuck out where it was up about 100%, or $14.25 million. Fund balance helps pay for a good amount of our capital and some of our enterprise funds. Electric's capital is up about $15 million, and their fund balance appropriation is up about $11.5 million. So that's driving a lot. It's a lot of one-time kind of high dollar projects in electric that are driving what that budget to budget change looks like. Similar chart for expenditures. Personnel is about 33% of the budget. Operating is about 36% of the budget. Now that operating number does include the $83 million for wholesale power costs. And again, the details are on these subsequent slides. Total expenditures, typo there at the bottom, matches the total revenue increase of just over $40 million. Personnel services are up about $12 million. Some things this includes: salary changes from the previous year. And so this was the comp class adjustments, the 1/3 study that went into effect in the current year. And so that was added to the base budget. That number included fire, which had a large increase, and so that's what kind of drives that number. That number includes benefits as well as salaries. And then proposed salary changes for FY 24-25, an average 3% mid-year merit adjustment, additional market increases for certified fire and sworn police personnel, an increased employer contribution to the local government employees retirement system. This is driven by the state. They tell us what we as a city have to pay per employee, and we budget what they say. That is increased 0.75% for employees and 1% for law enforcement. Those increases have been about that every year for, it's been a good 4 or 5, maybe even more years. It doesn't change anything with the service we provide. It doesn't change anything to retirement of our employees. It's just to help fund the retirement system for local government employees, but it's a big pressure on our salary and benefits budget. Increased employer costs to the city health plan. Healthcare costs are just going up. When we first got some of these estimates, first thing, Bobby left. But the first thing Bobby and I talked about was like, oh, there's Bobby, sorry. We were looking at it like, all right, we just went to self-funded. Is this because of that? But talking with our consultant, and Angela can confirm, if we had stayed not self-funded, fully insured, we were probably looking at another 5 or 6% growth. I mean, so we're still hoping to see those benefits, but we just need to be patient and give it time with that. And then lastly, an increase to the mayor and city council expense allowance. And so through research around during last year's budget time, it was discovered that in September of 2008, the city council approved tying the city council and mayor expense allowance to inflation. And so we have factored that into the proposed budget. We used from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Southeast region inflation, looking at 2023 versus 2022. That percentage was 4.5%. We applied it to the mayor's expense allowance and also city council member expense allowance, and included that in the budget. We found that policy, and we felt we want to be consistent with that policy. And so we just want to make sure you all are aware that that increase is in there. Looking at new positions, the budget includes 5 new full-time positions and 6 new part-time positions. The communications specialists, this has been discussed at several committees already, but this is kind of going along with the move to televising and streaming council meetings upcoming in the new fiscal year. In finance, an additional buyer for purchasing, and this will handle some of our increased bid processing, as well as look at some of our P-card transactions. In information technology, a GIS manager. This would act as the lead of our GIS, kind of centralizing it. We do have some decentralized GIS positions among several departments that require that, and so this would be kind of a person to kind of lead all of that together. In water sewer, we proposed 2 new positions, a public services IT coordinator. This would help with all the systems that water sewer has, as well as the new work order management system. And then a new assistant superintendent at the Ward Water Plant, and this would assist with regulatory and operational requirements. Lastly, on the part-time side, 3 new lifeguards and 3 new park attendants at City Lake Pool. After last year's season, which was very successful, Parks and Recreation evaluated their staffing and saw that there was a need for these additional positions. Those are the costs of the positions. However, Parks and Recreation did identify funds in their operating budget that could cover the cost, and so they are a net impact of $0 to the budget. And we thank Mr. Tillery for identifying those funds to help alleviate some of the costs. On the operating side, the total year-over-year increase was about $2.63 million. Wholesale power costs are decreased $7 million, just kind of trying to align that budget more with the trend in what we're paying. Our state and federal grants are increased a little over $2.45 million. Vehicle maintenance and repairs and our fleet charges for what departments pay to fleet to replace vehicles and rolling stock, that's increased $1.58 million. The cost of doing business, we talked about this early on, cost of supplies, cost of chemicals, cost of professional services, service contracts. These are up across the board. Some examples, our golf cart lease. Last year, council approved our new golf cart lease for Blair Park and for Oak Hollow. Each was about a $40,000 increase, $40,000 to $50,000 per golf course. So about $100,000 total. But then you think of all the different contracts we have at all these different cost levels and then apply it to the city budget and it starts to add up a lot. Some of this we're seeing is some of our contracts we have may be a 5-year contract. Well, 5 years ago was 2019, pre-pandemic, pre a lot of the inflationary impacts we're seeing. Even with escalators in some of these longer term contracts, that's not to keep up with that pace. And so we're seeing it kind of across the board. Another example, and this item's on your agenda for tonight, Finance Committee talked about it on Thursday. We have a contract with Pike Electric to kind of assist electric when needed for small call services. Just as our labor costs are going up, Pike Electric's labor costs are going up, and they're passing that on to us, and so our cost is going up. And so we're seeing that across the board. The timing is across multiple fiscal years, and we're just trying to absorb what we can, but also in some cases we just need to increase the budget to help pay for it. And lastly, another driver, information technology investments, just a little over $1 million. And this is new applications that are coming online, just increase in our licenses for our existing applications and products, and also some additional cybersecurity investments. Capital and capital outlay. So these are big capital projects, but also your capital outlay is kind of your smaller, your equipment, your vehicle purchases. So these are up $10 million. On the capital outlay, a big driver, increased cost for fire apparatus, $180,000. We have a replacement engine scheduled for next year. That cost is about 40% higher than it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we were budgeting $790,000 to replace an engine. Now we're budgeting $1.1 million, and that doesn't even take into account now the length of time between purchase to actual delivery on site that we're seeing. And also some additional fleet and rolling stock replacement. Things are costing more. So our normal replacement schedule, the same dollar amount gets us less. And so we're trying to keep up with at least replacing what we can. The proposed budget does not replace everything that meets the criteria. It probably covers about half of what meets that replacement. But we work with fleet services and departments on prioritizing what needs to be replaced, what's most urgent, and just try and make it with the other equipment until next year. On the capital project side, general capital is down $1.8 million year over year. That's those NCDOT grant projects that we talked about earlier. Electric is up $15.7 million, and this is just some high dollar projects that are driving their capital plan. The showroom district improvements, that's a little over $3.1 million. The improvements on Washington Street, that's $4 million. Our AMI project, that's a $7 million line item. And then beginning to make investments toward a municipal operations center for electric, that's also $7 million. The total cost of that, we kind of want to space out, instead of one big, here's the total cost in 1 year, we try to space it out a little bit, but it does drive that year over year increase. And then stormwater down about $6.2 million, but again, they had that $5 million grant for West Green Drive drainage improvements, and that went away. And so that's why you see that year-over-year decrease. Want to provide a little more details on the general fund. So I already talked about the proposed increase in the property tax rate, and so that increase, which is for operations, is going to be allocated to the general fund. Sales and use taxes are down a little over $3 million year. And so we talked about the retail sales reduction due to the ad valorem distribution change. In years past, our occupancy tax revenues have budgeted in the general fund, and then they're passed along to Visit High Point, and also the $250,000 that goes to debt service for debt on the stadium. In working with finance, we felt that that was better served as a new special revenue fund, and so we created a new showroom and occupancy tax fund, which is where our pass-through funds to the Market Authority and to Visit High Point are. So it's out of the general fund. So if you look at budget to budget, you're going to see that decrease, but then you're going to see a new fund that had no appropriation last year and that appropriation coming for this year. So for the most part, it's an accounting change. Our licenses and permits revenues are up about $213,000. This is mainly due to increased building permit activity. We work with inspections on budgeting that conservatively, but also a reflection of kind of where that's trending. Our charges for service are increased $640,000 in the general fund. This is mainly parks and recreation. Pool admissions, the first year of City Lake Park pool being open, very successful and a lot of revenues coming in. And so we kind of played a wait and see approach to what those revenues actually were, and now we're just aligning the budget to reflect that. And also merchandise sales. And so in the past, Parks and Rec has kind of had a third party handle. If you go into Oak Hollow Golf Course and buy a polo that says Oak Hollow, a third party was handling that. We've taken that service in-house, and so there's an expense side, but there's also a revenue side to it. And Recreation has, I believe, a 30% markup on kind of what we're paying versus what we're seeing. And so that just, you see that on each side, the expenditure and the revenue side. And then our miscellaneous revenue, and this is mainly driven by our investment income. Higher interest rates have helped our investment income. Again, working with finance on trying to be reasonable, but trying to be conservative. You know, if interest rates fall and this revenue goes down, we don't want to then be coming up here next year and saying, well, hey, now we need other revenue because our interest rates went down and our investment income went down. So trying to kind of find that balance or sweet spot between what we budget and what we're seeing. On the expenditure side, the personnel budget in the general fund is about $103 million, and that's up $6.7 million. We talked about those 1/3 adjustments that went into effect in the current year. A good amount of those do affect the general fund to the tune of $952,000. That is salaries and benefits. And then the addition of 3 of the 5 full-time positions and the 6 part-time positions. Some of the drivers, the 1/3 comp and class study for next year, which salaries and benefits totals $472,000. Market salary adjustments for police and fire, and those are the totals, and that includes salaries and benefits. The average 3% mid-year merit adjustment. Healthcare costs to the city. We talked about what that increase is in the charges for service. This is kind of what we're seeing per employee. It's about an 8% increase per employee that the city is covering. And then the 3 new full-time positions, I didn't include the part-time positions because, as I noted, those are a net impact of 0 to the budget.
Can I just ask, oh, sorry, you're going there right now, okay.
We did want to talk about a little history of what's been done with police and fire, and we'll give a little bit even more information than this at one of our first work sessions, but the chart below, those salaries are the minimum starting salary for the pay grades. So in FY 22-23, there was an adjustment in that fall to police, an adjustment in the spring to fire. Those increases, the police impact was $803,000, the fire impact was $668,000. With some of our growth in revenues that we're seeing over the past few years, we were able to absorb those costs for those budgets. We talked about, our revenues aren't quite growing at that rate, and so we find other ways to help pay for this. So here's just some history on just a police officer and a firefighter starting salary or minimum in their pay grade. July 1st, 2022, reflective of the adjustments in 22 and 23, and then what the minimum would be for those positions in 24-25. I will note that it's not just police officer and firefighter that are affected, it's all the way up to but not including assistant chief, deputy chief, and chief. Those are studied separately within how the 1/3 study is set up, but all the positions up to them have similar adjustments, but we want to, most of the talk about police and fire salaries are always focusing on police officers and firefighters, so that's how we wanted to show it. But at our first work session, we're going to go into a little bit more of what those comparisons look like and kind of how we compare to others and how that methodology was. But we did want to show you kind of what's been done over the past few years within these position classes.
I wanted to add one piece to this. Typically, the city of High Point has studied 1/3 of our workforce each year. We consistently do that. That allows us to absorb smaller impacts to our budget over a period of time. You may see other municipalities that will study their entire workforce at one time, but they might not necessarily do that every year. And what that results in, you usually have some large swings of where you have to make some significant salary adjustments within your budget. Currently, the city of Winston-Salem and the city of Greensboro are conducting pay studies of their entire workforce. So for us, although we're only studying 1/3, we consistently do that every year. So it takes us about 3 years to look at the entire workforce, but we're making adjustments to our workforce throughout the year versus waiting all at one time and trying to absorb that cost all in one physical year.
Looking at operating and capital outlay in the general fund, and that total budget is about $27.8 million. It's decreased year over year by $1 million. Again, as I mentioned, we are moving that kind of contribution from the occupancy tax out of this fund, and so that's what's driving that decrease year over year. But just some highlights of what's driving it: property tax administration fees, and this was just kind of passed on by the county. Computer software licenses, so this was a good amount of those information technology investments we talked about earlier. Our vehicle replacement charges, this is what departments are paying to fleet services to be part of the vehicle replacement cycle. Our Parks and Recreation inventory purchases, this is the other side of that merchandise sales we saw in revenue. And then fire apparatus replacement increased $180,000. Debt service, so debt service fund is what, the debt on voter approved bonds, that's where that is. But we do have some smaller debt service, mainly in information technology, police and fire. For IT, it's kind of some equipment, servers, some high dollar things like that. For police, they're body worn cameras. And for fire, a few years back, there was some apparatus that was replaced via financing. And so no new debt service, it's just continuing payments on those. And then our interfund transfers out, so that totals about $13 million. It is decreased $325,000, budget to budget. The large drivers, tried to list those out in the bullets. The debt service transfer about $6.5 million. General capital about $3 million. The $600,000 to general bond projects, that is our repayment of the interfund loan from the solid waste post-closure fund that helped fund the City Lake Park improvements. And then the transfer to the transit fund, about $1.8 million. And I'll just note that that subsidy is about 30% of transit's budget. Next, we'll just look at real kind of brief snapshots of some of our major enterprise funds. So water sewer, a proposed increase of 5%. This rate increase is helping fund the increase in personnel costs. The operating costs, supplies, chemicals have been a real big driver to their operating budget. And then our immediate infrastructure needs for the system. There's no appropriation of reserves in the proposed budget. The addition of 2 full-time positions, as we talked about earlier, and water sewer PAYGO capital projects total a little over $11 million for next year. In the electric fund, there's no proposed increase to electric rates, but there are some changes and new rates. There's the base facilities charge, which an increase to the base charge and a decrease in the per kilowatt hour, and that's intended to be revenue neutral. The consolidation of schedules for time of use, consolidated peak and commercial non-demand, and this is on our commercial and industrial fee schedules, also meant to be revenue neutral. The Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard, or REPS charge, which is a small monthly charge that's passed through the Power Agency. And then the new electric vehicle charge. In talking with Mr. Barrier, he kind of stated that the charge for this is the equivalent to paying $1.39 per gallon of gas. And a full charge, to recharge a electric vehicle will cost about $8 to the average user. And so we're gonna get some more information, talk a little bit more about fees at our first work session, but that's kind of how it's tied. It's meant to encourage usage, not deter usage via cost, but also bring back some of those costs for having those, the use of those charging stations. Wholesale power totaling $83 million. And PayGo Capital totaling $25.81 million, and again, that's about a $15 million increase. There are details in the electric pages and the capital improvement program of the document, but a lot of those projects that are just high dollar that are driving it for next year. Looking at other enterprise funds, in solid waste, there's no changes to any of their fees. Their operating is driven by their vehicle replacement costs, vehicle repairs, and also some new sampling regulations for PFAS at the landfill. And their PayGo Capital totals about $1.63 million. And in stormwater, no proposed change to their fees. I will note they have a $450,000 contract for routine stormwater maintenance. This is due to their high number of vacancies that would be performing this routine maintenance. This allows us to get some of that work done until we're able to turn some of those vacancies into filled positions. And then PayGo Capital for stormwater totaling about $934,000. Capital improvement program. The full list of projects is in the appendix. There's a large section in your budget document. We will go in more detail at the first work session, kind of looking through the specific projects. But this is the total by kind of fund. Your general capital is kind of your general fund departments. And so of that $3.682 million, almost 2.6 is general fund dollars, and then some other funds do contribute to some projects. And I'll note on transit, $3.7 million in capital, but $284,000 is a local match. The rest is funded by federal and state revenues. And so total capital program amount of almost $47 million. And so kind of next steps. So this is the calendar that we are proposing to be considered for this evening. So the first work session, which would be 9-10 days, depending what day you start that count, Wednesday the 15th. Topics we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about the capital improvement program, more detail on the fee schedule, some more detail on police and fire pay, and then also responses to questions. Monday, May 20th, hope to schedule the public hearing and hold the public hearing. Wednesday, May 22nd, we'll also respond to any questions that come up. And also those meetings will have representatives from the Market Authority, Visit High Point, and Downtown High Point, Inc. To present on their budgets. We list that last work session on May the 29th as if needed, and then budget adoption scheduled for June 3rd. I do want to just kind of reiterate, but also there's some new council members. We have a long time between now and that first work session. You're getting a 300+ page document. You're getting a lot of information thrown at you today. If you have questions before that meeting, please don't hesitate to reach out to the city manager, the assistant city managers, myself. Generally, how we handle those responses is a combination of we'll put it on a slide, or we'll have some sort of Word document or PDF that we kind of add to, so everyone can see the questions that have been asked, everyone can see the answers, and we kind of just add to that as we go on, questions pending. And so please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to answer any questions. If there's any research we need to do leading up to that first meeting, we can do so. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff based on this presentation? I know we'll discuss quite a bit in our work sessions, but if there's anything at this moment to clarify anything, feel free to ask staff. Yes, ma'am.
I do want to share with council that for the budget work session on the 15th, at the time that those were scheduled, we did not realize that a couple of our council members would be traveling at that time. So if there's a scheduling conflict that you have for the work session on the 15th, we are going to provide a virtual option for that. There won't be any action taken at that meeting, so it'll be a discussion. So any of you that need to join virtually, just let us know, and we'll make sure that you all have the link.
Thank you.
And real quick,
You have to fly out at 10:30 that night.
I'd love for you to be here with us.
and just real quick, if you don't mind, I do want to introduce our two budget analysts, Rosalind McNeil and Don Scales. This budget doesn't get done without them. They put in a lot of long hours and a lot of work, asking departments a lot of questions to make sure we're able to put forth the best proposed budget with as much information as possible for you all to consider.
Thank you all. All right, thank you so much, Stephen, as well as everyone else in the budget department for helping us with that. We'll transition to our next item, which is 2024-174. This will be an update from the Water Quality and Environmental Protection Agency. Staff will provide information on a recent announcement by the EPA regarding water quality limits and contaminants. You all may have seen the email that came from our Assistant City Manager, David DeCane, speaking on this item. And David's with us now to go through some of that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon to the council. I am David McCain, Assistant City Manager. I'm here to deliver the lovingly titled Boring Water Report. Some of you sat through a portion of this last March, so it's going to be an update to that. So quickly, for those who aren't familiar, what is the Safe Drinking Water Act? It's a federal law that defines what water contaminants are and gives the EPA authority to set limits on contaminants, and then establishes the processes that the EPA has to follow. There are 4 basic types of contaminants, and for the purpose of this conversation, we're going to focus on the chemical PFAS in particular. So in order to get something regulated by the EPA, even whether it's known or not known to be hazardous, it takes many years for that to happen. So I'm going to do a very brief history. So this all started back in February of 2021, the process for regulating PFOA and PFOS. You can see what they are up there. I'm just going to call them PFOA and PFOS from here on out. They're members of the larger PFAS, perfluoroalkyl substance family, which is about 14,000 man-made chemicals that are out there that have been in use since the 1940s. But in particular, and there's a group of 5 others that we're going to talk about here in a moment that are included in the new regulation. So PFAS gets to you 80% of the time through consumer products, and that little wheel there shows you all the things that PFAS is in. If it's water resistant, if it is stain resistant, if it is non-stick, if it's a lot of things, it likely has PFAS in it. And the study of PFAS and its effect is based off of a 70-year exposure as well. So it's been around for about 80 years or so, and so realizing this is a problem. And that the most important part of this slide is to see where it comes from. It's good luck trying to avoid it, right? And then B is we do not use PFAS in the water treatment process. So the city, as a purveyor of water and sewer service, we're a recipient of these compounds. We're not a producer of it. So I think that's important for folks to understand. Here's the sort of the talk about PFAS and PFOA and PFOS in the human bloodstream over time. Good news is those numbers are declining. So it appears that we've done better with how the waste streams of some of these suppliers are handled, but it's still out there, it's still prevalent, and it can still cause a problem for humans. So last March, staff was in front of you to talk about the proposed limits that the EPA was analyzing, and they came back with what you can see there, 4 parts per trillion for each PFOA and PFOS. They also started a public comment period and established possible effective dates for consideration as well. For your reference, a part per trillion is between here and the moon, it's 240,000 miles. 1 part per trillion of that distance is the width of a human hair. So 4 human hairs from where I'm standing right now is 4 parts per trillion of my space from the moon. So you're talking about a very small amount, but it's spread over a very large amount of water, right? So if you put a drop, another one is if you put a drop of water that's contaminated with 4 parts per trillion, it has to go into 35 Olympic-sized swimming pools to be the equivalent. And it's dispersed throughout all that. So it's not going to be easy to get out of the water is probably what I'm really trying to tell you. So fast forward to April 10th of this year, which prompted staff's email to all of you. The EPA did announce that they've settled on the 4 parts per trillion limit for both of those compounds and a hazard index of 1. There's a mathematical equation that's even more boring than most of this report that I could have thrown up there, but I didn't. It says it's a hazard index of 1. for those things. And Gen-X is probably a compound that you heard of previously. It's most commonly associated with nonstick cookware. So the rule takes effect in 5 years. That's when we would be out of compliance if we don't meet those new limits. And there's monitoring requirements for the first 3 years. So here's what we know, before we tell you what this actually means. Our finished water, the water coming out of the Ward Water Treatment Plant, we know that our PFOA levels are between 2.05 and 4.29. So the magic number's 4. Want to be below that. PFOS, clearly above 4. We are also part owners and receive water from Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, who take their water from the Randleman Reservoir. And you can see the numbers there. So that's water that's coming out to the consumer. The raw water is the most important thing, right? Because if the raw water coming in is above 4, then you have no chance of getting it below 4 without expensive treatment. So City Lake, you can see the numbers there. PFOA is looking pretty good. PFOS is not. But the hazard index is also good because it's less than 1. Oak Hollow checks every box for being compliant with the new rules. So, spoiler alert, we're probably going to do something with our water source, our main water source. So what is next? I'm going to skip the top one because we always continue to sample, and frankly, we have all those numbers because our staff in the state, back when this all started in 21, started trying to figure out where is this coming from, where should we be drawn from, and how can we handle it. We're obviously going to we're going to adjust our primary water source to Oak Hollow Lake. It's really for 2 reasons. 1, to be compliant with this, but 2, we have a dam project that we need to do, and we can't do that if our main source is City Lake. So there are 2 items on the consent agenda tonight, heard by the Finance Committee. One is for purchase of a generator, and the other is for some engineering services to allow us to get an emergency generator installed at Oak Hollow. Then we can make that switch. Another huge important piece that probably would take another whole briefing is we're continuing to see compensation from the manufacturer of these chemicals. There are class action lawsuits that have been settled for some firms like 3M and DuPont. We are part of those, and we're working with the city attorney and others to get our claims filed and get as much as we can back so that we can put in the treatment that we're going to need so we can continue to use City Lake as our backup source. And of course, there's no one-size-fits-all treatment for these things. So partnering with PTRWA and others, we want to make sure that whatever treatment we ultimately put in makes the most sense moving forward, because this is not the last time you're going to hear of PFAS family chemicals being regulated. So we want to make sure whatever we put in is going to kind of cover all of that and keep us compliant and our customers safe. So what really, does it change anything that we're doing today? Absolutely not. We're going to continue to operate as we always have. We are protectors of the public health. We take that seriously. Deliver high quality, compliant, and safe drinking water. Everything that we have, all the information we have, all the sampling results are always available at any time. We are required by law to publish an annual report called the Consumer Confidence Report, Annual Water Quality Report. You can find that information on our website. Again, any of you or anyone can call us at any time. We'll make that information available to them. I thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions of staff regarding this item?
So how much could this end up costing the city? I mean, ballpark. I mean, if we switch mostly to Oak Hollow, does that solve like 80% of the problem? Or as we grow, then, you know?
I don't know the exact answer. You know, ballpark is going to depend, and I'm looking at Robbie Stone, our Public Services Director, who's here. It'll depend on the treatment technology and the degree to which we have to treat. So we're going to make an assumption that we can use Oak Hollow indefinitely. But there will come a point in time where we may have to use City Lake, and there would be a certain amount of blending that could be done to get those numbers lower before it had to be treated. The treatment technology that we use, there's a number of those, granular activated carbon, there's reverse osmosis and others. So we're going through that process right now. It will be a 7+ figure number. It'll be in the millions of dollars, but I'd be remiss if I tried to give you something that you could count on at this point in time.
But you have to kind of figure it out. I mean, if the new rules go into the next 5 years, you can't wait until year 4 and have to figure out kind of how to do it and
No,
that's
sir.
the stuff, right?
You're right, and that's why I mentioned PTRWA. They did a lot of pilot testing in small batches at their plant, And so working through that with them, I think we have an idea of what we would pursue. But because we can switch to Oak Hollow, we'll be compliant long before the 5-year mark ever hits. And we'll be under construction or finishing construction before the 5-year window hits for city lake treatment.
Damon, does kind of the slower timeline, does that possibly affect the potential cost of treatment down the road? How does that affect the potential cost down the road? Is it, you're looking at increased cost for treatment, or are you looking at potentially less cost for treatment?
You know, in today's environment, just like you heard the budget director talking about, I mean, I would think tomorrow things could double, right? It's, so, I don't know. And the demand for these types of treatment systems are gonna be relatively high.
Sure.
You know, there's like 6,000 systems across the country that are affected by the new rules. You know, we're really on the lucky side, because we're not gonna have to treat the full stream. We'll probably design it to that, be able to do it in modular things to kind of keep the cost down and phase it in.
Sure.
But I would almost have to say, the way things have been going, it would be a higher cost, you know, over time. But we'll have results, and we'll be ready to start doing some engineering work within the next 6 months to figure out what that's going to look like.
Yeah, I would just say, considering if we look at the kind of the inflationary pressure on things, you know, it's better to address it now than let it get down the road.
Oh, yes, sir.
David, thank you for that.
I have, sorry, Councilman Andrew, one question. There was a complaint with some citizens in Jamestown about 1,4-dioxane that doesn't affect us, does it?
That's a long conversation,
Yeah.
the 1,4-dioxane. It exists, it has, I don't know, Robbie, I'll give it to you. He's better at that one.
It
than I
it
am.
does exist. It's been more prevalent in our wastewater stream. So that's what we're really monitoring and working with the EPA on that at this point. As Dana mentioned, there's a number of different treatments that are available, depending on which treatment we choose or land on. It will kind of depend on the amount of removal and also the expense. Obviously, the higher amount of removal, the higher the expense.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully, with some of the judgments being made against the companies who are contributing towards the contamination, we'll be able to recoup some of the costs. So we'll look forward to that as well. So,
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Damon, thank you. We'll continue to monitor. The next item we have is 2024-173, and it's a departmental overview from our transportation director, Greg Venable. Greg, we appreciate you being here with us and look forward to the update you'll give.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mayor, members of the City Council. As the Mayor said, I'm Greg Venable, Transportation Director for the City of High Point. Just want to go through a few slides here and update you guys on exactly what we do in transportation, besides making it more difficult for Damon's his route to work. So we'll move through. So what is our mission? So our mission is to provide a safe, economical, and environmentally sensitive means of moving people and goods through an accessible transportation network, which serves the best interests of High Point. How do we meet that mission is our priorities there on the right-hand side: improve safety, manage congestion, support sustainable growth, and enhance quality of life. So we'll go through our divisions here. They're listed, starting out with our administration and engineering. We have signs and markings, traffic signals, our signal system operations, parking, planning, and transit. When fully staffed, we have over 90 employees with a budget, this year's budget of about $9.8 million. Our CIP for 23-24 is about $6.5 million, which that includes federal, state, and city dollars. You guys, this is our organizational chart. Take a look at that, memorize it. We'll get a test at the end. So our administration and engineering. So administration, we do day-to-day operations of the department. We handle all of our requisitions, our purchase orders, respond to the concerns from the public, which at times can be many. On our engineering side, we do driveway permits. These are more associated with individuals who may come in if they want to change their existing driveway, modify that, or want a new driveway in an existing residence. So anything that goes for new construction, those permits are included in the residential construction permit. We also do lane closure permits. These are people that are doing, or companies that are doing work in the right of way. So anything that's done in the right of way, an example would be out here on Commerce, the construction that's going on the IHSC building. Those folks come in for a lane closure permit. They can actually close the entire street. We look at things like making sure their traffic controls accurate in place. They have appropriate detour signage, things like that. We also look at, we collect traffic data. So there may be an issue. We'll get a citizen who will call in about an intersection, or maybe one of you guys may call us and say, hey, could you mind looking at this intersection? So we'll go out and collect data. We'll do traffic counts. We'll do speed studies. We'll look at accident data. That'll all come back, and we'll do engineering studies. So we'll take a look at it. Is there something out there that we can do to improve an intersection? One of those is we're currently looking at is the intersection of Rotary and Phillips. That is currently a stop condition on Phillips. We're looking at maybe possibly making that a four-way stop. So we collected all that data to go into that study. We also get traffic calming requests. So we'll have citizens that will call, want to go through the process of the traffic calming process, and we'll work with those folks on collecting data for their neighborhoods. We also have site distance issues. That may be anything from vegetation growing in the right of way at the corner of an intersection. If it's in the right of way, we'll take a look. If it's something that we can trim back, we'll do that. If not, if it's some shrubbery on the private property, then we'll contact the property owner and have them take a look at maybe trying to get that cut back. Ordinance and policy. So we have the driveway ordinance, which kind of dictates where driveways can be located, what size they need to be. This is more, it dictates our residential driveways, but also our commercial driveways. And so when development comes in, we'll look at our driveway ordinance. Does it meet certain criteria? Is it wide enough? How far can it be located from an intersection? Things like that. We also have our traffic impact analysis, which is also more developer driven. So if a developer comes in and they're proposing a 300 home subdivision, we'll take a look at that. Our threshold for a traffic impact analysis is 150 cars or trips in the peak hour. So we'll look at that. If it does meet that threshold, then they will require to do a traffic impact analysis. What that does is looks at a site, what are the impacts to the transportation network, and then what kind of solutions are they proposing to mitigate that impact. As I mentioned before, we have traffic calming policy. That and the petition policy to lower speed limit kind of go hand in hand. The first step in the traffic calming policy is to get that speed limit reduced in neighborhoods. So that's step one. But then the policy kind of guides folks through that process, what the policy states and what are the requirements that you need to meet in order to get those traffic calming measures in place. This is our administration and engineering organizational chart. You have myself, we have an administrative coordinator, we have an assistant transportation director, we have a senior transportation engineer over operations, we have a transportation engineer over safety, which includes our engineering tech, and then we have our planning division, which includes our GIS analyst, our senior transportation planner, and just the transportation planner. Our signs and markings divisions, we design, fabricate, and install traffic signs. We maintain just over 23,500 signs citywide, and those are on 20,167 new channel posts. We have some software that we use as our inventory software. We can go in, we can put work orders in, they can go out and change those signs, and it goes in the system so we know exactly what's been updated and when it's been updated. We also do traffic control, especially for special events, parades, putting out traffic control, lane closures, road closures. Also, we work with the furniture market to do traffic control. Each market we put out, we take away all of our on-street parking. We have courtesy parking currently. During markets for safety concerns, we get rid of all of our on-street parking, block that out. That happened, I think, about 2001 after 9/11. They came in, FBI, SBI, got together with the police department and tried to figure out ways we can make market safer. That was one of the things that we've done it ever since. We also do markings. We have our, as you see there on the right, we paint our arrows. We also paint our stop bars, our crosswalks. We do not do any long line painting. So if you have an area that needs a center line painted or a long edge line, we do contract that work out though. So we did have a paint truck many years ago, and we got rid of that and just went to the contract portion of that. Also, we assist NCDOT if necessary. You guys are aware of some of the striping issues on Main Street. We've contacted them and they are going to get that this month. But if for some reason they were gonna delay that project, we could go in and strike it, get our contractor to do that. This is our organizational chart for signs and markings. We have a supervisor, we have our sign fabricator, we have 6 signs and marking techs. There are 3 teams of 2. And then we have 2 seasonal staff that just goes around and they just trim around our signs, weed eating, basically. NCDOT does reimburse a percentage of maintenance and installation costs, not nearly enough. We have traffic signals. Traffic signal maintenance, we maintain 233 traffic signals, both inside and outside of the city. When I say that, we've got to have an agreement with NCDOT to maintain the signals, especially on Main Street down in Archdale. We also maintain some of the signals in Jamestown. There's 196 NCDOT signals and 37 city signals. We do routine scheduled maintenance. We'll go out, look at the cabinet, make sure there's nothing. We've had issues where snakes will get in there, different critters will go in there and cause havoc, chew wires, things like that. So they just go out, make sure everything's operating appropriately. If there's anything that needs to be changed in the cabinet, they'll do that. They'll look at the signal heads, any bulbs out, make sure the standard height is there, measure the height from the roadway to the bottom of the signal. And then we have unforeseen issues where you have wind comes out, like today possibly, strong gust of winds will turn those signal heads. Something can go into flash, and we'll go out and do routine maintenance on that. Obviously, accidents is a big issue with hitting our signals and mass on things. So we also do new traffic installation. We do full intersection build. So one of the examples of that would be Cobain Avenue at Hamilton. So when that project came in, city crews, our staff went in and put in the mast arms, all the underground fiber for that intersection, built that entire intersection. We also do pedestrian signals. We put pedestrian signals at Grimes most recently and at Ferris. We already had signals in place, but no pedestrian signals, so we installed those at those locations. Our signal group also does our overhead signage. So they have the bucket truck and our signs hang on the mast arms at our larger intersections. So they are responsible for our overhead signage. They also do fiber runs. So our communication, which I'll talk about in a minute with our signal system, we can have communication with all of our signals. So any kind of issues where they need to run fiber, either overhead or underground, they do that as well. Our traffic signals work chart there, traffic signal supervisor, excuse me. And then we have 4 techs, 3 tech 1s and a tech 2 currently on staff. Again, NCDOT would reimburse a percentage of the maintenance and installation costs for those signals. This is our signal system operation. So this is our traffic operations center downstairs. If you guys ever want to come in and sit in there for a little bit and take a look, you're more than welcome. We have, we monitor signal operations and adjust timing, so we can take a look at, with our cameras, there are 63 camera locations, look at the signal timing that's through a corridor. If there's a change that's needed, or if we get a complaint, we can pull it up on the system downstairs, pull the camera up, take a look, see what kind of issues there may be. We maintain the database for all our intersections, all 233. We also have the fiber network maintenance that I mentioned earlier. That fiber network allows us to have communication to all those signals. We do have a signal tech who, if you look at the bottom there, we upgraded our system in 2021 for $8 million. The gentleman that worked for the splicing company at the time spliced all of our intersections, and we were able to hire him on to help with our maintenance issues here with the city. So that was a great hire. We also do department IT services. Because we have the signal system and it's on its own network, we do have an IT person that is responsible for all of the department IT needs. And we also provide our camera feed. This is one of the newest things we've done is add the camera feed to the real-time crime center, so the police can pull up all of our traffic cameras if they need to. They do not have the ability to control those cameras, but they can pull them up, take a look. If they need for us to move the cameras around, they can contact us and do that. We also monitor special events from our center downstairs, especially during market. We have police officers that come in as well to help monitor market traffic, things like that. And as I mentioned, we had the system upgrade in 2021 for $8 million. There's our operations. We have our supervisor downstairs, our transportation programmer analyst, another transportation analyst, and our signal system tech, which I mentioned before. Again, this is also, we submit for some reimbursement for some of this through NCDOT. Our parking services, we have 3 decks, 1 surface lot, So we have the Plaza deck, which has 654 spaces. 454 of those are currently leased. We have the Main Street deck, which you see there. It's 252 spaces, currently 16 leased. We have the Broad Street deck, 292 spaces, currently 153 leased. We also have the Pit. Everybody knows what that is. There's 30 spaces there, 28 are currently leased. All decks are full during the furniture market. They all fill up for those days. Our current rates, $1 an hour hourly rate, $10 daily maximum rate. Our monthly rates are 1 to 9 cars, $50, 10 to 99, $45, and 100 plus cars, $40 a month. Estimated revenue is at $438,000.
How does that compare to other cities, their decks, how much they charge per hour?
Yeah, we're a little bit lower. We did increase our our fees this past year, so we went up. We were still at $1 a day, but we were at $7 maximum rate, and then our fees were, I think they were $30 monthly, so we increased that. We're still well below like Greensboro and Winston-Salem. Some of their spaces go for $90 to $100 a month, just depending. So there is. There is that need in Winston and Greensboro where they don't, a lot of places, like if they have a lot of downtown development residential, and they don't offer parking, so they have to find their parking in the city decks. So that's our current parking staff there. We have a parking services supervisor and a coordinator. Those both are full-time positions. We have 5 part-time parking attendants. We have 2 seasonal parking attendants. And then we have a position there that we're putting this current budget to have a maintenance person specifically for our 3 decks. Currently, our signal staff are maintaining our decks for us. So they do things, just minor stuff like changing light bulbs, different stuff like that they can do. Anything larger than that, we'd have to contract it out. So our planning, transportation planning, and the High Point MPO. So our planning division identifies, evaluates, and documents future transportation needs. You see the map there on the right, that's actually the State Transportation Improvement Program, so those are the funded projects in our area. They secure that state and federal funding for projects. They promote all modes of transportation, whether it be road, bike, ped, or transit. And they're also responsible for our plan review from our department, so they work with our planning department on the technical review committee side and reviewing plans as they come in from development. They also do grant administration. The MPO, which I mentioned, many of you may not know what that is exactly, but we are the lead planning agency for the High Point MPO. So it's a federal requirement to do transportation planning in our urbanized area. We are considered urbanized. That is the boundary you see there on the map. We get federal dollars. It's an 80-20 split. Feds pay 80%, we pay 20%, but we divide that 20% between all of the member jurisdictions. You see those in light blue there. Current budget is about $485,000. That is going to be reduced a little bit next year. The urbanized area changed. They changed what the definition of urbanized is. So our population went down on the urbanized area, so they reduced those planning funds accordingly. So hopefully this is just a one-year blip, and then it'll go back up again next year. So you see the jurisdictions there. We have 8 municipalities and 4 counties that are members of the High Point MPO. High Point Transit is a fixed route service. We have 17 buses in our fleet, 11 weekday routes and 10 Saturday routes, over 500 stops, and about 3,400 riders per day. That is on your right is that's our busiest route. That's North Main Street, Route 10. We also have High Point Access Service. This is an ADA complimentary paratransit service and a demand response service for 70 and older. So the ADA complimentary paratransit service, there is a quarter-mile buffer around all transit lines, so we'll take you anywhere within that quarter-mile buffer. It doesn't really show up good on that map, doesn't look like, but we also have a demand response service for those 70 and older. It'll take you anywhere within the city limits of High Point. We operate 6 minibuses, and they operate during the same hours as our fixed route service does. It's a federal requirement, and it averages about 1,300 trips per month. Transit is also responsible for federal grant administration and oversight. Obviously, there's a lot of federal dollars that go into transit. The operating budget for 23-24, as Stephen has said in his presentation, is approximately $5.5 million. $2.7 million of that is federal funds, $1.8 million is city funds, about $500,000 is state dollars, and we get about $330,000 annually. That fluctuates on our passenger fares. What we're currently working on is, in our transit side is evaluating, doing a plan update. We have a short-range transit plan that we are actually putting out for request for proposals to evaluate our assets, our routes, our ridership, and our opportunities. Take a look at microtransit. Many of you are familiar with that phrase. How can we better serve those areas that we don't currently serve? So we're looking at possibility of microtransit, and then also looking at the regional contribution and impacts. How can we better work with our regional partners to serve folks in our area and the surrounding area? So we plan to look at those things as well. Transit administration staff, we have our transit manager, we have a transit accountant, a safety coordinator, small business programs manager, and a maintenance supervisor. We also have an assistant maintenance supervisor, and then 6 maintenance techs. 2 of those are more of, they clean our buses. We clean every bus every night. We have a wash station. They come in, they get cleaned down every night before they go out the next day. And then we have our fixed route side. This is our operations side. Our assistant transit manager is responsible for our operations. He oversees our fixed route. We have a transit supervisor on that side, 2 assistant supervisors, 3 customer service specialists, and then currently we have 22 operators continually trying to hire for those positions, especially that transit operator position. On the access paratransit side, the assistant transit manager is over that as well. He has a paratransit supervisor, a coordinator, and then 5 paratransit bus drivers. So a few of the projects, I'll just go through these quickly. If you have any questions, you stop me. We have our bond projects, which is Washington Street, Burton Avenue, Washington Street under construction, Burton getting ready to be under construction, Triangle Lake Road is currently in design right now. Potentially 2026, I think is the time frame on that one. Our High Point on the Rise, the RAISE grant, that's the Elm Street improvements as well as the Southwest Heritage Greenway. We have South Main Street, our Market District design and construction. That was currently under design by Dewberry consulting firm. That is with the $9 million that the Market Authority received from the state. We also have Mendenhall terminal improvements. We put in several gate arms there to control access into those areas, mainly during off-market times. We also did some cleaning, pressure washing of the terminal, and we're in the process shortly to replace all the signage in there as well. We have Salmon Drive Extension, which is up on the north end of town there at Palladium. Gallimore Dairy Road Extension, which is pretty much complete, but it's waiting on some private development up there. We have our Ski Club Road landscaping, so this is a DOT project, the widening of Ski Club Road, so we want to put some landscaping out there for the city with that. South Main Street Interchange Project, going on the south end of town, gateway into the city. Johnson Street, Sandy Ridge Road, Sandy Ridge Road 940 interchange. 68 Wendover, both adding additional lane in each direction on those 2 projects. And then we have our sidewalk projects, our North Main Street study, which you guys have heard about recently. We're doing a signal timing study just underway. And then we just completed about a year ago a parking study for the Emmett X district.
When you put it like that, it really shows the volume of projects going on right now.
Several things.
Quite a few. Also, just really quick, since you said it, Salmon Drive Extension, ribbon cutting, if I'm not mistaken, not ribbon cutting, groundbreaking, is that what it is, Mike?
Yeah.
I think it's this Wednesday. Mayor Pro Tem will be speaking at it, so just in case anyone's interested.
So you can see just a few items there we're doing with our parking decks, trying to get those, some repairs done there, the additional lighting. Also, our transit system, we did receive some federal dollars, $1.5 million to do bus and bus facilities grant for administrative office and maintenance area expansion, terminal repairs, and then I mentioned their short-range transit plan and microtransit study. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Greg, thank you. The part you just mentioned there, can you go back one slide? So to be clear, under High Point Transit System, at one point, we conducted the study. I remember we allocated about $100,000 for the 5 Points micro hub.
Yeah, the transfer hub, yeah.
Has that study been completed to see what that could look like?
So that was part of that short-range transit plan that was done. I think it was done in actually 2015. So that's part of updating that plan, is to take a look at that hub, make sure that's still a viable option. How we look at that in the future with our transit routes, how can we work that? At the time, we were looking at an east-west kind of connector tied into that hub, but that is still an option. We just wanted to get an update But that's what this plan will do, is take a look at that. Are there other options available now that maybe we didn't consider? The microtransit option is also, obviously, on the table, but, that is still under consideration for sure.
And so basically, we're still looking at the 5 points option. We
Yeah.
haven't figured out exactly what it looks like
Right.
yet, because it's a
Yeah.
part of this bigger plan.
Correct.
Greg, in terms of the micro transit design, what typically would a micro transit fleet look like for those who are unfamiliar with the model of micro transit?
So it can be done a couple of different ways. You can do it with, we have our access buses, it can be something done with those. Typically, it's more of just your standard minivan, and then you'll have, it'll be an on-demand type service center or Lyft or something like that, where you can go out and call, make a schedule, come pick you up. Most municipalities who actually have implemented it they won't take you from point A to point B, but they'll get you to a fixed route system,
Right.
right? So they'll serve those areas that don't have a fixed route,
Right.
get you to those fixed route systems. And then there may be some modifications in that as well. So it could be a combination of how that would look in the future.
And those vehicles wouldn't require CDL drivers?
Correct.
And so we would be able to implement those quickly and hire directly?
Yep.
Also, seeing as that, that could potentially come online much faster than any of the other initiatives that we have.
Right.
Do we have a timeline? I know we have a broader timeline, but have we considered a separate timeline for maybe bringing that online?
We don't. We've had some discussions internally about what that would look like. Our transit manager, having discussions with her about, could we do that temporarily, with our current buses and our current drivers? We just haven't really decided how that would look and what's the best way to serve the public. Is it something that we can do? And again, it goes back to cost.
Yeah.
Right, so, your ridership for those type of services, and your cost per ride is quite a bit more expensive than just your standard $1.25 route, but, we're looking at ways that we can maybe try to implement that a little bit sooner. Maybe we do it as a trial, pick an area and see how it would work, see what that looks like from a cost perspective.
Sure. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff that we might have at this time? Greg, thank you so much for the presentation. I also say thank you to you and your team for being involved in the discussions we're having at the county level with some of our partners there. I know, if I'm not mistaken, in the Prosperity Livability and Safety Committee, you all will be hearing about a joint resolution that Guilford County, Greensboro, Guilford County Schools, and High Point may consider passing, where we can collaborate with our partners across the region. And hopefully what we're doing here within High Point, all the things you just mentioned, that we can continue to see how that all aligns and works together. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
We'll transition and actually go into a closed session for item 2024-176. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Motion to go into close?
Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Holmes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Council Member Andrew. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it.